When Bentley stuck a turbocharger onto the Mulsanne to create the Mulsanne Turbo, it created an entirely new genre of car, really. A super luxury car that you could drive like a sports car, a massive limo with an unlikely amount of pace, and by the time it had evolved into the Turbo R, it was still pretty much unique in the marketplace. But BMW wasn't far behind, and when they stuck a V12 engine into their 7 Series, the ultimate driving machine really did have something to equal Bentley. Now this is a later E38 generation 7 Series, which is the second generation to carry the V12 engine. This particular one is a really unusual car because it's in sport spec, it's short wheelbase, it's a rare car. But for a very short time you could buy an E38 750i and a Bentley Turbo R. We're going to try these two cars back to back and see which one gets our vote as a modern classic. I'll just put my double glazed window up. Double glazed, what about that? BMW had for years been stung really by being in second place behind Mercedes when it came to luxury cars. They'd only ever been able to offer a 6-cylinder engine, whereas Mercedes of course could offer a V8 in the S-Class long before BMW was able to offer a V8 of its own. And the first generation 7 Series only ever had 6-cylinder power. But in late 1987, BMW stunned the automotive world, and Mercedes particularly, by unveiling a V12 engine, and in a stroke they jumped Mercedes' V8 and just gone right to the top of the game. Yes, you could buy the Bentley Turbo R, but it's a very different beast, and just driving this 750i here, it's immediately obvious how very different they are. This E38 model came out in 1994, and this is actually a later car, it's a 2000 car. This feels like a finely engineered tool made to the highest precision standards, whereas the Bentley is something of a massive hammer. They've both got adaptive ride, but the Bentley's is a slower acting hydraulic system, whereas this is all electronic. It works really well. I mean, this feels like a much smaller car than the Bentley. Like all the best BMWs, this just shrinks around you, and we're on quite a windy road here. It's so precise and so well controlled, and it does feel like like a sports saloon really, yet it's a massive V12. This is more of a tightly composed, taut driver's car than the Bentley, but it's just as relaxing, it's just as refined in everyday use. The general levels of refinement and dynamic composure in this car, which, let's not forget, is a 2000 car, aren't that far away from a brand new car you could buy today in this class. Driving our Turbo R today, it does feel like an old car, but this really doesn't. It's hard to believe this car is 20 years old. No creaks, no rattles, and the paintwork and just general quality of fit and finish is unbelievable. What you really notice comparing this car to the Bentley on a road like this is the age of the design, the body shell engineering particularly. This feels really rigid, utterly solid, whereas the Bentley, derived as it is from the Silver Shadow, the structure creaks a little bit as you go over potholes, and this just doesn't. This just shrugs it off. More modern BMWs, if you specify the sport suspension, you get a pretty crashy ride, but this actually does have a nice ride. You can feel that you've got pretty low profile rubber, but general composure of the car and the bump absorption is brilliant. BMW could offer you things like HID xenon headlights, double glazing, and all that sort of stuff, and properly built-in car phone as well. I think this is a better big sports saloon than the Turbo R ever was, actually. It's so smooth. This is a 5.4 litre, this later model, 326 horsepower. There's no waiting for turbo lag, nothing, it just goes. The pace of the Bentley does surprise you, but this car doesn't so much surprise you immediately as surprise you a few seconds later when you look down at the speedo. That's what it's all about, it's so unobtrusive. There's something about this car that you really can just imagine sitting on the Autobahn, just sitting there, passing everybody, all day. I think this has got elegance on its side, both of appearance and engineering. I think our Turbo R might have met its match here, you know. Stepping out of the 750 into the Turbo R, I mean, it's not a fair comparison really. The general design of the BMW is so much younger, but this just feels like a floaty boat after the BMW. And it's got the same sort of power, 320-ish horsepower. It's half a ton heavier and it feels it. You still can drive this big Bentley hard on a winding road like you can the BMW, but the limits are a lot lower and you just don't feel right doing it. The BMW feels like it was made to be driven enthusiastically, but this thing, I don't know, it feels like you're doing the wrong thing. If you start hustling this down country lanes, you can, don't get me wrong, but it feels like you're driving it wrongly. It's unseemly, it's floaty, It doesn't have the sharp turn in. You sit high up for a start, which doesn't help your own perception. You've got this big steering wheel. This is unbelievably the sports steering wheel according to the specification on our car from Bentley. It's about as sporting as a Routemaster. It's massive with a thin rim. Of course, where you see the big difference between the BMW and the Bentley, things like this handcrafted veneer on the dashboard and the doors and the leather, it's all very obviously not made in a factory, and that's kind of the whole appeal of the car. In many ways that means it doesn't age quite as well as the factory made car, but you do feel you've got something that was made with craftsmanship and love. The downside of course is that because it's effectively handmade, it's a little bit creaky, and it's not made with the same precision as the BMW. You pay your money and you take your choice. But getting back into the Bentley is a little bit like putting on a comfortable pair of boots again. I've only done a few miles and now I feel harsh complaining about it and comparing it unfavourably to the BMW. It's a different sort of car in truth, isn't it? Quite possible that anybody who ordered a Turbo R just didn't want something like the BMW, no matter how excellent it was. They just weren't interested. They wanted something slightly different, something a little bit left field, and something that was handmade. That's why they were so expensive, of course. The Bentley still impresses with the way it gets down the road, but it's noisy compared to the BMW. It was regarded in its day as being, a paragon of refinement, but compared to that V12 in the BMW, the old Bentley V8 is a pretty noisy old beast. Being a 1990 model, this Turbo R of ours has got the active ride control, which continually varies the damping according to speed signals and steering angle and things like that. The idea is that it reduces body roll when you start driving enthusiastically, and it's an automatic system, so you don't need to switch it on and off like modern cars with their sport mode. It works well because it does keep the body roll in check for this heavy 2.5 ton car. And you can throw it around, but it's nothing like as composed as the BMW, despite the active ride. And yet, the BMW manages to give just as good a ride quality, so that's really where the progress in car design is most obvious to me. It takes a bit of getting used to, the Bentley. You sort of set it up for corners and you sail around. Once you're used to it, you can drive it with some speed, but the BMW, you can just jump into it and go. It's a very conventional car, but just a very capable one. It is interesting to think that if the BMW and Rolls-Royce tie-up had happened sooner than it did, it could well have been this generation of Turbo R that ended up with the BMW V12 under the front, or a BMW V8 like the Arnage had. That would have been really interesting. I wonder if anyone's ever retrofitted one. Well, I've driven these cars extensively today in the dry and the rain, and I have to say it takes a lot to make a Turbo R feel ordinary. But actually the 750i does that. I love its blend of technology, its subtle looks and its sheer go. It's reminded me why I love BMWs. If I had to choose one to go home in, actually it would be this 750i. It's absolutely lovely, but I don't think we're going to be able to prise the keys away from its owner. So Turbo R it is again.